Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. It is Poetry Thursday, and we are still in the month of Spooktober, so I wanted to talk about another poem with a somewhat spooky theme. Kind of, but not really. It does have a bit of a haunting theme to it, like scary elements. But unfortunately, I think, this far into, my Poetry Thursday, I've encountered many of the scary poems already. There's probably more that I still have to discover, though. And today's poem is all about skeletons and Vikings and Norse mythology. I am referring to The Skeleton in Armor by Henry Longfellow. For those who don't know, Henry Longfellow was an American writer who lived in the 1800s. He was known for writing lyric kind of poetry, which you see a little bit here. And he also kind of built up mythologies and talked a lot about the heroic past, which you see a little bit of in this poem. But he also wrote The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, which is a famous poem in America, at least, kind of building up the history and the legends of America, much like Washington Irving of the time, although those individuals kind of also told a little bit of lies and pretended that America might have been something it was not in the process. But it's interesting to see the legend building and myth building that you see in early America. And Henry Longfellow was very active in the world around him, especially opposing slavery and hoping for reconciliation after the Civil War, which is pretty nice. And he was very involved with other writers and poets and people of the time. So I have a feeling that he's like one of the more well-known names that you might find on the Poetry Thursday playlist for this channel. But without further ado, let's talk about The Skeleton in Armor. I will read it, do a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. The Skeleton in Armor. Speak, speak, thou fearful guest, who with thy hollow breast, still in rude armor dressed, comest to daunt me. Wrapped not in eastern balms, but with thy fleshless palms stretched as if asking me, why dost thou haunt me? Then from those cavernous eyes pale flashes seem to rise, as when the northern skies gleam in December, and like the waters flow under December's snow, came a dull voice of woe from the heart's chamber. I was a Viking old, my deeds through manifold. No skald in song has told, no saga taught thee. Take heed that in thy verse thou dost the tale rehearse, else dread a dead man's curse, for this I sought thee. Far in the northern land by the wild Baltic strand, I with my childish hand tamed the gerfalcon, and with my skates fast bound, skimmed the half-frozen sound that the poor whimpering hound trembled to walk on. Oft to his frozen lair tracked I the grizzly bear, while from my path the hare fled like a shadow. Oft through the forest dark followed the werewolf's bark, until the soaring lark sang from the meadow. But when I older grew, joining a corsair's crew, over the dark sea I flew with the marauders. Wild was the life we led, many the souls that sped, many the hearts that bled, by our stern orders. Many a wassail bout wore the long winter out. Often our midnight shout set the cocks crowing, as we the berserk's tale measured in cups of ale, draining the oaken pail filled to overflowing. Once as I told in glee tales of the stormy sea, soft eyes did gaze on me, burning yet tender. And as the white stars shine on the dark Norway pine, on the dark heart of mine fell their soft splendor. I wooed the blue-eyed maid, yielding yet half afraid, and in the forest shade our vows were plighted. Under its loosened vest fluttered her little breast, like birds within their nest, by the hawk frighted. Bright in her father's hall, shields gleamed upon the wall, loud sang the minstrels all, chanting his glory. When of old Hildebrand I asked his daughter's hand, mute did the minstrel stand to hear my story. While the brown ale he quaffed, loud then the champion laughed, and as the wind gust waft, the sea foamed brightly. So the loud laugh of scorn out of those lips unshorn, from the deep drinking horn blew the foam lightly. She was a prince's child, I but a Viking wild, and though she blushed and smiled, I was discarded. Should not the dove so white follow the sea mew's flight? Why did they leave that night her nest unguarded? Scarce had I put to sea, bearing the maid with me. Fairest of all was she among the Norsemen. When on the white sea strand, waving his armed hand, saw we old Hildebrand with 20 horsemen. Then launched they to the blast, bent like a reed each mast, yet we were gaining fast when the wind failed us. And with a sudden flaw came round the gusty skaw, so that our foe we saw laugh as he hailed us. And as to catch the gale, round veered the flapping sail. Death was the helmsman's hail, death without quarter. Midships with iron keel struck we her ribs of steel, down her black hulk did reel, through the black water. As with his wings aslant sails the fierce cormorant, seeking some rocky haunt with his prey laden, so toward the open main, beating to sea again, through the wild hurricane bore I the maiden. 3 weeks we westward bore, and when the storm was o'er, cloud-like we saw the shore stretch to leeward. There, for my lady's bower, built I the lofty tower, which to this very hour stands looking seaward. There lived we many years, time dried the maiden's tears. She had forgot her fears, she was a mother. Death closed her mild blue eyes, under that tower she lies. Ne'er shall the sun arise on such another. Still grew my bosom then, still as stagnant fen. Hateful to me were men, the sunlight hateful. In the vast forest here, clad in my warlike gear, fell I upon my spear. O death was grateful. Thus seemed with many scars, bursting these prison bars, up to its native stars my soul ascended. There, from the flowing bowl, deep drinks the warrior's soul. Skål to the Northland, skål. Thus the tale ended. In terms of analysis, there's a little bit worth talking about with this poem. In terms of narrative, I think it's pretty easy to guess what's happening here. The narrator stumbles upon a skeleton in armor, as is the title of the poem, and then the skeleton relays a tale of their origin, where they were a Viking. They came from a northern land, and they were also a sailor, and they eventually married a prince's child. A princess. There was some, uncertainty about their match because he was a Viking and she was a princess, but I think that they were in love, and so it was allowed to be. I think there was a big old fight on the sea, and I'm starting to rhyme here, and then eventually, They find themselves in a tower, presumably they build themselves a castle. The princess unfortunately dies, and then the Viking dies by falling on their sphere, allowing them to earn their way into Valhalla, into heaven. And this skeleton ends their story there. So it's very much a saga, an epic of sorts that Longfellow is trying to relay here. I think the structure of the poem also adds to that, because Longfellow typically wrote lyric poems, which you see. I think this is an example of that, and it has an interesting rhyme scheme in that it's A A B C C B. So he rhymes guest dressed with dressed, or guest breast and dressed, and then he says me, and then he rhymes balms, palms, and alms, and then again me. But later you see December rhymed with chamber, thee with I guess it's not very clever there. Gerfalcon and On, Shadow and Meadow, Marauders and Orders. Not perfect rhymes there, but things that sound pretty similar. So it kind of adds to the overall legend, overall sort of epic that Longfellow is trying to get across here. So not a whole lot to this poem. But there are some very interesting things that he has to say about class, Viking versus the princess, and falling on your sword, being a heroic death, which is a very tragic death. But here it's meant to sound every bit as epic because you fought into the end, and in Viking mythology you get into Valhalla. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Skeleton in Armor by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Pretty solid poem, one that certainly doesn't have a lot to say, and it is kind of thematic for Spooktober, but also it's more of a legend than anything else. But whatever works on Spooktober. So yeah, pretty interesting poem. I'll put a link to it in the description. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this poem or this poet if they don't already know, or if they want to talk about poems on Poetry Thursday, they can do that as well. But until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and Viking related travels. Farewell.